Today, let's go over every single episode of Dragon Ball Z, from the Cell Arc to the Otherworld Tournament, naming one fact or more for each one. Let's begin. Episode 118. This episode clearly hints at Vegeta and Bulma being a thing, with the way they treat each other. Still, this was only done because the anime had the benefit of hindsight, as this was not something Toriyama planned ahead of time. Neither Toriyama, his editor, nor the audience knew that Trunks was going to be a thing really. Toriyama didn't set anything up for Vegeta and Bulma. As his second editor, Yu Kondo, explained, there was absolutely no intention to say, let's set up this background and have so-and-so be born. So regarding who Trunks' parents are, it's not like we sat down and planned everything in detail, thinking, later we'll tie all these clues together. So let's set it up like this. Toriyama all of a sudden had him marry Bulma, so even there wasn't anything like, wouldn't it be better if we did this way? We looked at the storyboards and it was already decided, kind of like, so that's how it is, huh? Episode 119. This episode features future Trunks' first proper appearance in the anime. Although never outright stated, it's pretty obvious that he and his story take inspiration from the Terminator franchise. For one, the design of the T-800 informed the creation of Major Metallotron years back. Future Trunks also has some similarities to John Connor from T2, a movie that came out around the same time as his first appearance in the manga. Add to that the fact that the day Trunks warns of, May 12th, is the same day the T-800 arrives from the future to kill Sarah Connor. Also, we see Tien and Chaozu wearing some unusual outfits. In reality, they were working on a farm. Akira Toriyama has explained that, as an epilogue for Tien, Launch eventually did catch up to him, and they lived together at Tien's farm. But she wasn't built for a life with someone who only cared about training and no romance. So she left. But she still visits from time to time, and so does Yamcha. But what really made them wealthy wasn't just their farm, but the freelance work Chaozu would do, as other farmers would hire him, so he'd use his telekinetic abilities on their farms. A business so successful, he ended up amassing sizable wealth, and is likely how they got the money for their dojo in Super. Episode 120. This is the final episode of Dragon Ball Z where a scouter is used, with Trunks' power level of 5 being the final one seen, as he was hiding his power level. This scouter would return many more times in later media, like video games and Dragon Ball Super. Additionally, this episode features one of the best songs in the franchise, Battle Point Unlimited, the theme song of Trunks as he's attacking Frieza. This track was one of the only ones composed by Kenji Yamamoto for the Z anime, as he's most well known for composing theme songs for the movies, video games, and Kai, until he was found out to be plagiarizing his work. Battle Point Unlimited in particular is allegedly taken from The Murder of Love by Propaganda. Episode 121. There's a subtle hint at future Trunks' history after he defeats the Colts and comes together with the others, as the very first two people to trust Trunks and take sodas from him are none other than Bulma and Gohan, his mother and master, bonds that surpassed space and time. Episode 122. The development of the Android arc had many bumps along the way, so much so that 17, 18, and Cell were never meant to exist. In the original manga version of the scene where Trunks warns Goku about the androids, he specifically mentions androids 19 and 20. But Kazuhiko Torishima, Toriyama's first editor, didn't like androids 19 and 20, calling them a geezer and a fat guy, despite the fact that he wasn't Toriyama's editor anymore. But either way, he listened, and Toriyama changed his plans to 17 and 18. Because of this change, the anime decided to keep it ambiguous, rather than straight up name the androids. Episode 123. The original manga had no designs for the Yardrats, since Goku only mentions them and they're never shown. This episode gives them and the planet a filler design. Once Akira Toriyama got involved with the defunct MMO, Dragon Ball Online, he designed what his version of the Yardrat looked like, a much different view of what the anime shows. However, Toyotaro, the artist of the Super manga, is a huge Dragon Ball fan, so he managed to marry these two designs by showing that they both exist and are both canon. They're just two different types of Yardrats. The manga also reveals that Goku's mentor during his lost year was the Yardrat elder Pibara. Episode 124. The events of this episode, the Z Fighters training and all, are all filler. We don't really get to see how they prepare during those 3 years, since there's just a time skip. We only see a tiny bit of Vegeta, but there's a chapter cover that shows a little bit more, with some things that never happened in the anime, like Gohan and Piccolo sparring against Super Saiyan Goku. Episode 125. The filler episode everyone claims to be the best one. It's a fun one. I mean, this is the only episode in the entire series where Piccolo wears something other than his normal gi. And despite it being filler, it's entirely based on two different covers from the Dragon Ball manga, chapters 255 and 256, where Goku and Piccolo can be seen driving a new car the next chapter, after crashing the last one. They're even driving those same two cars. Episode 126. Although we see a lot more of the rampage in the anime, the main human kill we see from Jiro is censored. In the manga, he rips him out of the car and crushes his neck completely. It's a lot more gruesome. Also, Trunks' baby room has a clock based on the alarm clock invention from Dr. Slump, Toriyama's previous work. But that's not the only Toriyama meta reference in this episode. Around where Piccolo looks for the androids, there's a couple wearing a Bird Studio t-shirt, Akira Toriyama's studio. Episode 127. Goku telling Krillin to take Yamcha up to Bulma, where he left the senzu beans, actually has a mistake in the manga which is corrected in the anime. Yajirobe gives Goku the senzu beans, the androids attack, they jump down to investigate, and suddenly Goku doesn't have the senzu beans. Instead, Bulma does. But the anime added a previous scene where Goku throws them at Bulma, fixing the issue. Episode 128. This episode has a filler scene where Roshi tells Marin the history of the Red Ribbon Army, as a recap for those who miss Dragon Ball. Naughty naughty. For some reason, the dub makes some very weird changes, like claiming that Tao was the military leader of the army and that he wanted to rule the world, when in reality he was just an assassin hired to kill Goku. Then they act like Red is Dr. Gero, and that he created all these weapons and was the leader of the army. These are all just really weird script changes, but that last bit isn't entirely wrong. In 2014, with the color release of the Dragon Ball manga, Toriyama had a set of interviews alongside each volume. There, he mentions that Dr. Gero was in fact a founding member of the Red Ribbon Army, and was effectively in control. He goes on to explain that the army resorted to androids as weapons so that they couldn't be used by their enemies, and that he developed all their weaponry and technology. So even if by accident, the dub was partly right. Episode 129. The first episode with Super Saiyan Vegeta. The entire flashback of how he transformed is filler, since we never see it happen in the manga. We barely even get an explanation. I do really like what they went with for the anime. Additionally, we never see Vegeta go into space. It only seems like he trained in the gravity chamber at Capsule Corp. The manga also never implies that the gravity chamber is in another spaceship, but rather just another room at Capsule Corp, something even the anime itself goes back and forth about. Episode 130. Android 19 is finally destroyed. We hardly even knew you. Akira Toriyama has explained that the model for number 19 was a doll that was displayed in a command center of an enemy base. Once the Red Ribbon Army destroyed it, Dr. Gero took it with him as a war trophy. Episode 131. This is the first episode to finally switch from Goku's previous anime-only home to the canon accurate one from the manga, which sits by the river and doesn't have a hangar. The exact address of Goku's place is 58N018, 439 East District. And at least according to Kakarot, it's down from the mountain where Grandpa Gohan's home is. Episode 132. This is the first episode where we get a look at 17 and 18, though they're only properly released in the next episode. Every single android prior to 17 and 18 were fully artificial, like 19, but the main issue Gero had with them was personality control. They all ended up being too dark, too pure, or just plain stupid, according to Toriyama. Some of these older androids also had the power absorption that 19 and 20 do, which was an older energy source Gero had to reinstate after realizing that the infinite energy androids like 16, 17, and 18 were too difficult to control. His idea was that in order to combat the personality problems, he would kidnap humans who were already bad, so he wouldn't have to program their personalities, choosing to kidnap two young criminals, Lapis and Lazuli, who would become 17 and 18. Episode 133. In this episode, we're introduced to one of the strongest characters in Dragon Ball, Door-sama. In all seriousness, despite Krillin and Tien being incredibly strong, they're not able to do anything against the door. It isn't until Vegeta blasts it away that it comes down. But to be fair, if Gero can make androids who are just as strong as Super Saiyans, who's to say that he can't do the same for a door? Later in the episode, Dr. Gero also magically has both hands, when he should only have one since Piccolo destroyed the other one. Episode 134. Android 16 is first introduced in this episode. Although the explanation given by Jiro is that 16 would kill them all, Toriyama has since then given more explanations as to why Jiro didn't want to release 16. The doctor based Android 16's model on his son. He was a high-ranking soldier in the Red Ribbon Army, but he fell to an enemy bullet. Having a special place in his heart for his child, Jiro gave 16 great power and a fearsome explosive mechanism, but he also didn't want him to be destroyed in battle, giving him a gentle personality, which in his eyes caused 16 to become a failure. His model's real name was Gevo, the son of Jiro and Vami, a brilliant scientist who was turned into Android 21 in Dragon Ball FighterZ. Episode 135. Android 17 in this episode mocks Vegeta by calling him the Prince of all Saiyans. But 17 shouldn't know that Vegeta is a prince, since the first time this is brought up is on Namek, while facing Dodoria, and Jiro did not take his spy bugs to Namek. The dub did have the benefit of hindsight, and Vegeta called himself a prince early on, so in this case, the dub fixes the issue. Episode 136. There's a funny filler scene where two guys come to Kame House and hit on Marin, to which Turtle fights them off. Not only is the only fight Turtle has in the entire series, but he also proves that power levels aren't the only thing that matter in a fight, since in the Saiyan arc, Bulma reads his power level as .001. So either Turtle is crazy capable in other martial arts abilities other than raw power, or these guys are genuinely the weakest characters in the franchise. Episode 137. There's a whole flashback sequence recapping Piccolo's history, from Kami to King Piccolo splitting, to Piccolo terrorizing the world. But for some reason, we skip from young Piccolo's first attack all the way to his battles against Goku, skipping over the backstory of Mutaito sealing Piccolo away with the Mafuba. Also, the medicine for Goku's heart virus goes from pills to a liquid in between episodes. Episode 138.
The anime fixes a mistake from the manga where not only is Yamcha's gi magically fixed from one chapter to the next, but the front of his gi changes from the King Kai kanji to the Turtle kanji. Although I always like to think that Chi-Chi just gave him one of Goku's old tops. Episode 139. There's a few interesting things about this episode. First of all, we get an extended flashback of future Trunks in his desolate world. A world where, like, everyone wears jean jackets and has swords, I guess? It seems like they weren't entirely sure on how to represent the future just yet. The insert song that plays through this is called Mind Power Key, marking another theme song for future Trunks. Curiously, he's probably the one Dragon Ball Z character with the most songs dedicated to him. Goku also has a nightmare in this episode, where he pictures the androids exactly as they are, although he's never seen them before. And finally, when Krillin calls Bulma, the ringtone that plays is the theme from Dr. Slump. I guess Krillin's phone is just constant references, since much later on in Resurrection F, his ringtone becomes We Are from One Piece. A reference to the fact that both Luffy and Krillin share a voice actress, Mayumi Tanaka. Episode 140. When Bulma, Trunks, and Gohan find Cell's time machine, Trunks confirms that it's his because of the word hope written on the side. The official English sub and dub both say that it was Bulma who wrote those words, but this is actually a mistake. In the original Japanese and the manga, Trunks says that it was he himself who wrote that word. The Future Trunks illustrated story, released alongside the Bardock anime comic back in the 90s, expands on this, giving context to the word, as Trunks explains that when future Gohan knocked him out, the last thing he remembered hearing was Gohan saying, "Trunks, you are our last hope," something he would take to heart, and before leaving to the past, he would write that word in both memory of his master and as luck for his mission. Episode 141. This episode is the return of the nameless Namekian, aka Piccolo fusing back with Kami. Although we've known since Dragon Ball that Piccolo and Kami were once the same being, them fusing back together was first hinted at when the Grand Elder of Namek implies that if Kami and Piccolo were one, then his power would be enough to take down Frieza. It's not that the original form literally had no name, but rather the Namekian forgot about it long ago, prior to dividing himself between good and evil. The nameless Namekian was the child of a Namekian refugee from the demon realm, named Katats. Neva from Daima even knew him as an old friend. The child was sent away to be saved from planet Namek's extinction event, where most Namekians of Universe 7 died. Because of this, the nameless Namekian, and thus Piccolo and Kami, are some of the only Namekians not to be the children of the Grand Elder. Episode 142. The terrifying Cell is finally unleashed, but he was never intended to even exist. As I mentioned before, Torishima had called Toriyama to complain about 19 and 20, so Toriyama replaced them with 17 and 18. But that still wasn't enough for Torishima, who complained that the villains were now just a bunch of brats. In response, Toriyama created Cell, but that wasn't the end of the story. His editor during this arc was Yu Kondo, who thought that first form Cell was really ugly, urging Toriyama to make him transform ASAP. So Toriyama made second form Cell, which he really liked. But Kondo thought he just looked like a moron, so he forced him to transform one last time into Perfect Cell. The bio-android had a ton of different designs before Toriyama settled on something more bug-like, which you can see on screen here. Episode 143. In this episode, Cell explains that he has the cells of Frieza, King Cold, Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo. That's it for the manga, and nothing implies otherwise. But the anime suggests that Cell has DNA from all the Z fighters. Krillin can feel Tien's energy within Cell, and the android uses the Kienzan and the multiform technique, which he never does in the manga. He also specifically mentions Dr. Gero considering collecting DNA from Trunks, but decided against it since he had enough say in DNA. But that doesn't make any sense, because Cell comes from a timeline where Goku should have been the one to defeat King Cold and Frieza. There is theories about how this could work, but that's a video for another time. Toriyama has explained how messy and difficult it was to keep track of things during this arc. Episode 144. In this episode, Cell reveals that he can use the Spirit Bomb if he wanted to, though we've never actually seen him do it in the show. Many games take this idea and run with it, including the Tenkaichi and Budokai games, where he calls on the planet's stupid energy.
Okay, planet, give me that stupid energy!
But he's not actually the only villain who can use it. The Dragon Ball GT Perfect Files databook claims that Baby's Revenge Death Ball is an evil version of the Spirit Bomb, while in Dragon Ball Heroes, the demonic android Mira has the ability as well. In Budokai 2, when Super Buu absorbs Cell, he gains the Spirit Bomb too. But one of the most interesting characters who can use it is both Goku Black and Fuse Zamasu in Heroes. I mean, if he can use the Kamehameha because he stole Goku's body, I guess it makes sense he could use the Genki Dama too. But it's pretty cool to see it either way. Episode 145. This is the first episode where the idea of going beyond Super Saiyan is introduced, specifically by Vegeta. The plot point of Dr. Gero's secret lab underground, and the supercomputer that created Cell, would later be reused for a few different expanded universe stories, like Dragon Ball FighterZ, where Android 21 was kept in a similar secret lab, and Super Android 13, where we see Gero get killed by 17 and his blood flows down to the secret basement, where 13, 14, and 15 were developed. In the anime and the manga, these androids are specifically said to have been destroyed. Speaking of which, an android who absorbs two other androids to achieve his super form is another example of one of the movie's remixing concepts from the main story. Episode 146. We are exactly at the middle point of the Dragon Ball Z anime. This largely filler episode has Krillin face off against First Form Cell at an airport, making Krillin the only character in the anime to try and fight every form of Cell, even counting his Embryo and Cell Max. Above that, one of my favorite pop culture references happens here. When Krillin's head goes through the plane wall, Cell places his hand over his face, but pulls back, wagging his finger and running away. This is a homage to the 1983 Twilight Zone movie, where a monster attacks a plane and does this exact same thing. Episode 147. This episode introduces the concept of the Room of Spirit and Time, otherwise known as the Hyperbolic Time Chamber, a room where one day outside is a whole year inside, meaning that every second is about 6 minutes and 5 seconds outside. Goku first trained in this place while he was Kami's student before the 23rd World Tournament, though back then he could barely even make it a month. Although Goku says the chamber can only house 2 people at a time, the reality is that there's only enough supplies for 2 people. In the Buu saga later on, we will see Goten, Trunks, Piccolo, and Super Buu all enter at once. Episode 148. The anime once again fixes a mistake from the manga related to Yamcha, since he just completely disappeared during this portion of the story. We can see that he's at Kame House in chapter 366, and just isn't there anymore the next chapter. He doesn't appear again until chapter 389, a whole 2 volumes later. In the anime though, he sticks around at Kame House, where he senses the battle against 17, but this is only a temporary fix, since by episode 150, he's also gone, but comes back a few episodes later. Episode 149. The fight between Piccolo and Android 17 continues in this episode. Between the twin androids, 17 is both younger and stronger than 18. 17 was built with too much focus on power, which allowed him to be way too rebellious. And though Jiro tried to fix this with 18 by restricting her power more, she still didn't follow orders. Episode 150. The anime slightly censors the blast from Cell to Piccolo, as in the manga, the hole left behind is much larger and gruesome, while in the anime you see a smaller hole, with just his clothes ripped. I also haven't gone to mention this, but both Piccolo and Cell get extra fingers in the anime. In the manga, Piccolo has 4 fingers and Cell 3, but they both have 5 in the anime. The Summer Vacation Special. Between episodes 150 and 151, a small special called Dragon Ball Z Summer Vacation Special was aired. It opens with Super Android 13, but Goku and Gohan eventually return to the city with tuxedos halfway through, and begin recapping all the films up to that point, in celebration for Super Android 13, which had recently been released. The special ends with Goku exploding in power and destroying the tuxedo, while Gohan isn't strong enough to do that just yet. Why Goku gave Gohan a tuxedo made of Katshin is anyone's guess. If you want to learn more about these very weird and obscure specials, I have a video all about it. Episode 151. The infamous scene where Goku stops Gohan from helping Piccolo by punching him across the face is filler. He doesn't do that in the manga. Also, this episode randomly decides to give Cell fangs under his beak, something he never had before and never has again. Episode 152. Cell finally absorbs 17 in this episode. In English, we're used to Cell having 3 different voices for each of the forms, but this is actually exclusive to the dub. In Japanese, Norio Wakamoto gives Cell an overall similar voice in each state, only really changing how calm and collected he is.
お前はすぐに私の食事になる。こうなったら無理にでも貴様を吸収してやる。
In English, however, Damon Clark gives every form a very distinct voice.
When bees lose their sting, they're gone for good.
Don't you find it remarkable how powerless you are? I could do that too if I wanted.
From something animal and bug-like to more gruff and nasally, and finally cocky and calm. This is actually why some older games, like the Budokai series, have the issue of Cell still sounding like his first form during fights, despite transforming. There was only files for the one Japanese voice, which the dub had to follow. Episode 153. This is the second episode with the Sacrifice title in English. And funny enough, the first one was also about Tien using the Kiko Ho to stop a villain. In the manga, Tien does about 5 tri-beams before falling down, but the anime really extends this to over 80. I personally counted 88 total across 2 episodes, which just means anime Tien is just built different. Episode 154. Vegeta and Trunks finally step out of the time chamber, with Trunks having clearly changed, especially with his long hair. Vegeta explains that pure-blooded Saiyans have hair that doesn't really change, unlike humans and half Saiyans. Toriyama has since then expanded on this concept. In the super exciting guide from 2009, Toriyama explained that Saiyans can have their hair change, using Nappa going bald as an example. The state of Saiyan hair is the same as the Earthlings, but its properties are just a bit different. It seems like Saiyan hair does usually stay the same, but it can be cut, and you can lose your hair when you age. But Saiyans do stay young for a long time, so it probably takes a while. Episode 155. Surprisingly, Super Vegeta and Trunks' respective counterpart have actually appeared in 2 different movies. Not counting flashbacks like in Superhero, Vegeta and Trunks use their Great 2 states in the first Broly movie and the BoJack film. They're also in that form in Plan to Eradicate the Saiyans, though their muscle mass doesn't always properly reflect that state. Episode 156. In the scenes where Goku tells Gohan to imagine Cell killing his friends, Gohan says that he's never met Cell, so he instead imagines imagines Frieza. We then get flashbacks of the Frieza arc, but for some reason, the only death Gohan actually imagines is Dende, since the other two are Goku in the explosion of Namek, which Gohan wasn't there for, but sure, he did think his father was dead, and Piccolo, who was just knocked out by a death beam. He doesn't imagine Vegeta, nor Krillin, nor any of the Namekians he actually saw die. This scene is also in the manga, but in it, Gohan doesn't blink in and out of Super Saiyan like in the anime. Instead, his aura starts to lift up his hair, but he falls to his knees. Gohan will actually go Super Saiyan in episode 160, which we don't actually see in the manga. There, Gohan actually gets flashbacks to all the death he's seen, including Krillin, so maybe that's why he didn't get it the first time. Episode 157. For some reason, what Vegeta drinks depends on each English dub. In the Funimation dub, he says,
I do a lot of push-ups and sit-ups, and I drink plenty of juice.
While in the Ocean dub, Vegeta seems to want a little bit more calcium in his diet, saying,
I do a lot of push-ups and sit-ups, and I drink plenty of milk.
Episode 158. Krillin destroys the detonator in this episode, saving Android 18. We had already gotten hints at 18 and Krillin's feelings, especially Krillin over 18, but we never see exactly how they end up together. Toriyama has admitted that he's really bad at romance, but has explained that Android 18, as a former delinquent, found Krillin's seriousness and straightforwardness refreshing, so she ended up falling for him. We could have actually seen a little bit more of this in Battle of Gods, which was originally going to take place at Krillin and 18's wedding. But once Toriyama got involved, he changed it completely. Episode 159. Cell finally absorbs Android 18. As I mentioned before, Cell transformed as fast as he did because of editor interference. But second form Cell was actually Akira Toriyama's favorite, and he did have different plans for him, where he would play a much more active role. It's hard to imagine the story going any other way since perfect form is so iconic, so I wonder what he had in mind. Episode 160. This episode adds a filler scene where Krillin launches a Destructo Disc at Cell. This doesn't happen in the manga, but it wouldn't be the only time Krillin would use that technique against Cell. In the manga version of Superhero, not only does the Kienzan damage Cell max, but because of that, 18 is able to break apart his wing, both of them getting revenge for the events of this episode. Trunks also has visions of the future where he imagines the deaths of future Gohan, Bulma, and Goku at the hands of Cell. So this is yet another different view of the future. Episode 161. This is the first proper battle with Perfect Cell, and it's a really ugly episode. But honestly, I do feel for the animators, since it's become well known that Cell is a horrifically hard character to draw and animate. Akira Toriyama has said that the spots on his body were a really tedious task, and thought that they were a mistake in retrospect, but the drawings felt empty without it. Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru, who I've mentioned before as one of the most prolific animators and character designers, agreed with Toriyama, saying that it was even worse because of the shadows they had to add. And on top of that, the animators were always in competition with each other to make the art better and more detailed with shadows. In Superhero, for the reanimated scenes, Chikashi Kubota asked Naohiro Shintani, the character designer for Broly, to add in the details of the spots for his art of Cell, which Shintani said never again to after finishing. Everyone hates all those darn spots. Special thank you to my good friend Vaughn DBZ for that one. Episode 162. This episode shows that Future Trunks has achieved Super Saiyan Grade 3, a powerful but very slow form. Takao Koyama, the creator of Broly, has said that he was inspired by Future Trunks' transformation sequence into Grade 3 to create an extremely powerful and scary Super Saiyan villain. This episode is also the debut of the Final Flash, where in some dubs, like the German one, Cell actually curses when hit by it.
Oh shit!
Episode 163. The fight between Trunks and Cell is much longer in this than in the manga, since there, Trunks isn't able to land a single hit on Cell, but here he performs a little better. The official French and Spanish guide, The Legendary Manga, says that this form is 10 times stronger than Grade 2, but brought down by its lack of speed. Although the 10 times multiplier may be a little weird, in this episode, Krillin compares Trunks to an Ozaru, so that's likely where the idea comes from. In Dragon Ball Super, a similar idea would come later on for Broly's Ikari form, which is the power of an Ozaru in his base form. Episode 164. Time for another round of the anime's favorite pastime, making visions of the future. This time we get something both close and very different to what would be shown in the special, which was still a few months away from being released. This ends up causing some contradictions, such as Yajirobe dying in this episode, which isn't seen in the special, nor does it carry over to Super. Trunks also uses a sword while still being a kid, and future Gohan has his scars despite still having an arm, which the special shows as happening at the same time. The death of the Z-Fighters is also different all around. Still, it's a really cool sequence. We also get a separate, rare view of a different future, the one which Cell comes from. Episode 165. This is one of the only times we see Goku use Super Saiyan Grades 2 and 3. But for whatever reason, after making a 2-second appearance in this episode, Goku uses Grades 2 once again during the Otherworld Tournament filler later on, as the Daizenshu guidebook specifically points out that Super Kaioken, which Goku uses against Piccolo, is a technique used alongside Super Saiyan Grade 2. Episode 166. In the scene where Master Roshi explains the World Tournament to everyone, Oolong says that Roshi won the tournament a long time ago, while Puar is completely unaware. What's curious is that neither of them should know that he was Jackie Chun, but there is somewhat of an explanation to this. Master Roshi could be talking about a separate win at the World Tournament, before his Jackie Chun victory. In World's Strongest, the second Dragon Ball Z movie, Goku talks about Roshi having won the tournament, but he's not talking about his match against Jackie, but a tournament victory from 50 years ago, as the movie's pamphlet explains. This makes sense, since he was already a famous martial artist with vast knowledge of the tournament, so it is likely that he's known for a win before the series begins. This scene also mentions that the World Tournament was not held since the destruction of the arena by Piccolo Jr., but this actually isn't true. The 24th World Tournament was held on May 7th, age 767, a few days before the android's attack. We eventually see this in a flashback when Popovich battles Videl. Want to go beyond Super Saiyan with me? By becoming a channel member, you're not just powering up, you're joining the elite. You'll get loyalty badges next to your name based on the different characters. The longer you stay a member, the stronger the badge gets. You'll also get access to new videos before anyone else, so you'll always be one step ahead in both power and release dates. Your name will appear at the end of my videos as one of the legends who helped keep the channel going. Seriously, I couldn't do this without you. Plus, you'll get an exclusive role in the Discord server, and more input directly to me. So if you want to support the channel, power up, and get some sweet perks along the way, then be sure to become a member. And let's go even further beyond together.
Jana.
Episode 167. This is one of the only times the term Z-Fighter is used in the actual story, though only in the English dub.
Dad's a Z-Fighter, Mom. He's not in a gang.
This is a term never used in the manga. The term is only really used in episode titles and by the narrator, with the first instance of it being used in the title of the first Dragon Ball Z special. Another interesting change that happens during the nightmare sequence is that originally Chi-Chi isn't complaining about Goku, she's complaining about Piccolo being a delinquent. During this same nightmare, Gohan also pictures Perfect Cell, but he hasn't seen any form of him. But to be fair, this has kinda been a recurring thing during this arc, since other characters, like Goku, picture the androids without ever meeting them. There's also a scene of narration in the manga where it's mentioned that the world had forgotten about the one who saved them from Piccolo, the Saiyans and Frieza. The world had forgotten about Son Goku, one of the most chilling scenes in the manga. Episode 168. There's a really cool sequence while Dr. Briefs and Bulma are fixing 16, where we can see his coding, including images of Jiro's information on Goku. But there's a bit of a mistake here, since it also ends up showing scenes of the Namek arc, like Super Saiyan Goku. These are scenes 16 should not have programmed inside because Jiro's spy bug never made it to planet Namek, and Jiro had no idea about Super Saiyan. The Dragon Ball Z Kai version of this episode fixes it by cutting away before the Namek scenes are shown. Episode 169. The 10 Days of Peace begin. Cell actually saves the world in this episode by destroying a meteor coming down to Earth, which doesn't happen in the manga. He just stands in the Cell Games arena and destroys the army. The outfit Goku wears during these episodes has him wear a really nice 59 jacket. The number is a pun off of Goku's own name, as 5 and 9 are read as Goku in Japanese. This is also the reason why May 9th is Goku Day. Episode 170. Tao Pai Pai returns in this filler episode to give Gohan some trouble. But this isn't his only appearance around the Cell games. In the Playdia game, True Plan to Eradicate the Saiyans, Gohan can find Tao Pai Pai atop a fracking machine while looking for the Destron gas. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot also took inspiration from this filler episode to add in some missions where Tao and his brother, the Crane Hermit, show up to scam some people, which Gohan has to take care of. Toriyama has spoken on the fate of these characters, since they disappear after the 23rd World Tournament in the manga. He went on to say that the two brothers were dead, because they got mixed up in something or the other, and since they were bad people, they probably weren't returned to life. My personal theory is that Boo got them. Episode 171. The Gohan Birthday Filler Episode. This episode doesn't actually take place on Gohan's birthday, and is instead a day to celebrate since Chi-Chi missed out on his birthday while he was in the time chamber. And we even get some backstory for Gohan, showing us the first time he used his powers, and how he ended up getting his name. The names given differ between languages. For example,
Dad, look, he's fine about the name Einstein.
but there are many more examples. Episode 172. This episode has some really sweet scenes of Goku, Chi-Chi, and Krillin going out for a picnic. This does happen in the manga, but with one big difference. Krillin isn't there. I personally love this change, since we've recently spent so much time with Krillin, and his relationship with Goku was at full display, making his sacrifice later on even more heartbreaking. We also find out that Goku did in fact get his driver's license after the filler episode with Piccolo, with Chi-Chi pleading to the instructor to give him a chance, and studying all night with him for the written portion. Toriyama explained in the Daizenshu that Goku's car is based on a Subaru 360, and that the wheels are not there for movement, since the car floats, but for repositioning it by hand when it lands. Episode 173. Dende becomes Kami of Earth in this episode, but a movie actually predicted this long before it happened in either the manga or the anime. Return of Cooler, known in Japanese as Clash 10 Billion Powerful Warriors, was released on March 7th, 1992. In the film, the Z-Fighters are going to New Namek at the request of Dende, who sensed trouble, only to find it overrun by an army of metal coolers. The thing is, Dende shouldn't be Guardian of Earth. In fact, he shouldn't be on Earth at all. This movie came out a whole 7 months before Goku would get Dende to become Kami of Earth, and the chapter wouldn't be adapted into the anime until 11 months after the film was released. This is why Dende wears something completely different from what he usually does. They had nothing to go by. As we've explained before, Toriyama didn't really plan this story, so maybe Toei just saw Dende's new role as an obvious progression, or it was one of the few instances of Toriyama planning ahead. This was even before Kami and Piccolo fused in the anime, and less than a month after they did so in the manga. This means that if you were a kid watching the Dragon Ball anime, not only did you get spoiled on Dende becoming Kami, but were also left wondering what happened to Kami in the first place. Episode 174. Here we have another episode with Tao Pai Pai. In the English dub of Z, Tao is often called General Tao.
General Tao, I've been waiting for you.
But in the main story, he isn't a general at all, just a hired assassin for the Red Ribbon Army. The title of General comes from the third Dragon Ball movie, Mystical Adventure, an Elseworld story where Tao is working as a general under Emperor Chaozu. Also, Mr. Satan, or Hercule in the dub, who was introduced in the last episode, actually has a backstory directly related to Tao. Akira Toriyama has explained that Mr. Satan is just a stage name. His real name is Mark, and he trained at the Satan Dojo. One day, while out with his master, they made fun of a guy with weird hair, who turned around and killed his master. This was Tao Pai Pai. Ever since then, Mark promised himself to never challenge someone if he wasn't 100% sure about their power. Episode 175. The Cell games finally begin in this episode. In the original Shonen Jump and volumes of the Cell games, Cell originally names the date as May 17th. The Kanzenban release, a perfected version of the manga with new covers and an extended ending, fixed the date to May 26th to go along with the Daizenshu. The Future Trunks Special. The second Dragon Ball Z special. Unlike the Bardock one, where the anime version came first, and Toriyama later brought Bardock into the manga, this special is based on a short bonus chapter by Akira Toriyama, named Trunks the History, the Lone Warrior. There's quite a few notable differences between this and the anime, including the fact that we meet Gohan without an arm already, and Trunks has Super Saiyan before Gohan dies. The chapter is relatively short, and has very little fighting, so we don't actually see a lot of the confrontations shown in the anime, nor do we see future Chi-Chi, Roshi, etc. We don't even see Trunks' battle against the androids prior to the departure to the past. This is one of the few times where the anime version is very clearly the preferred one, as it's the one used in flashbacks for Dragon Ball Super, even if they do remake it. And I will admit, as much as I prefer the manga most of the time, changing it so Trunks' transformation is triggered by Gohan's death is a genius move. There is also a bonus chapter in the Super manga, which shows the moments leading up to future Piccolo's death, where Gohan and Bulma try to get the Dragon Balls but are too late, as the Pilaf gang use them to turn themselves into kids, and Piccolo dies. Episode 176. Mr. Satan's disciples are completely filler, but they were actually one of the few things carried over from filler into Dragon Ball Super, as they make cameo appearances in Mr. Satan's home, and they've also had their own illustration by Toyotaro. Episode 177. The battle between Goku and Cell begins. But this actually isn't the first time they fought. There's a pretty rare special from 1992 called Gather Together, Goku's World. It was a VHS game where viewers could answer Dragon Ball trivia questions as Goku called them on the phone. This story takes place in a weird period of time where 17 and 18 hadn't been released just yet, but Trunks is in the past as they wait for them. Through the story, our heroes go back in time to reminisce on past adventures, with Goku even meeting his past self. They eventually return to the present, and as it turns out, Cell was not only unleashed, but had also been absorbing people in West City, and managed to absorb 17 and 18, while Goku and the others were away. Cell is able to handle them all pretty easily, until Goku goes Super Saiyan. So Cell uses the multiform technique, but thanks to us, he's able to get a clean hit in on the main Cell. And after that single punch, Cell gives up and flies away. I guess it must have been a really strong punch. Goku and the others watch the sunset, saying that no matter how strong Cell gets, they will be ready. It's a fun and obscure little story. Episode 178. During the battle against Cell, Goku uses an attack that's a direct reference to the pose from Chala He Chala, which has been referenced many times since then, including Daima. Episode 179. Sean Schemmel, the voice actor for Goku in English, has said that one of the most famous scenes from this episode is also his favorite scene, the instant transmission Kamehameha.
One of my favorite moves that also did work is the Kamehameha instant transmission on Cell's face. And when I first did that, I thought, oh, that's gonna work for sure!
The animation supervisor and animator responsible for the incredible Goku vs. Cell were Keisuke Masunaga, correcting animator Tatsufumi Tamamura in the section everyone loves. Also, in episode 177, Master Roshi is watching the battles with Oolong, Puar, and Chaozu, but in this episode, they're gone and he's also changed clothes. Episode 180. There's something of a plot hole here in the manga and the anime, as Cell explains that as long as the cluster of cells in his head remain, he can regenerate. But we see him regenerate with his entire upper body blown off, and later his whole body. But honestly, if those cluster of cells could survive the self-destruct, I can buy it surviving this. Episode 181. One of the episodes this chapter is adapting is chapter 404, one of the few beautiful colored chapters. In it, Toriyama's comment for the chapter mentions his robot machine for Shonen Jump's 25th anniversary. This arcade machine design was turned into a real Dragon Ball Z arcade game based on the Frieza arc in 1993. The game's sequel, Super Battle, was released 2 years later, based on the Cell games. That game has a bunch of alternate endings, including one where Goku turns Cell into a good guy, and one where Cell destroys the world. Episode 182. The anime adds this running gag about the news reporter calling Gohan a Bento salesboy, which began last episode but really continues here. This is because Gohan means rice or meal. They keep bringing it up over and over, though the dub changes it to say that he's a delivery boy, leading to one of the funniest dialogues in the show.
What sort of food will satisfy this terrifying creature's dark appetites? Will it be Chinese? Perhaps submarine sandwiches or pizza?
I don't know why, it's just so ridiculous, it cracks me up. King Furry also recognized Goku in an earlier episode, but in this episode, they decided to cut out any reference to King Furry recognizing him.
I will not send any more men to their graves.
The dub does this sometimes where they just remove references to the original Dragon Ball, most likely because it was still a few years away from being dubbed. Episode 183. The title for this and the next episode are switched in English. Whereas this one is called Cell Jr.'s Attack in Japanese, the next one is called that in English. In this episode, Cell creates 7 Cell Jr.'s, but in episode 185, he will end up killing 8. Gohan ran up on the Cell Jr. so hard he killed one twice, I guess. Episode 184. In this episode, we get one of the best transformation scenes in the whole series, Gohan turning into Super Saiyan 2. The theme that plays in this scene in Japanese is called Unmei no Hi, Tamashi versus Tamashi, or Days of Destiny, Spirit versus Spirit. It's weird to think about now, but the first time Super Saiyan 2 is named is when Goku's showing off all the transformations to Majin Buu. Before that, Super Saiyan 2 in guides and things like that was known as Super Saiyan Grade 5. While making Battle of Gods, Akira Toriyama had totally forgotten about Super Saiyan 2 and thought that 2 was the one with long hair. To be fair, they do look pretty similar on anyone but Gohan here. Episode 185. Though the Cell Juniors are killed by Gohan in this episode, the Dragon Ball Super manga shows in a bonus chapter that they're actually still around on Earth, specifically on Monster Island, where 17 tamed them and trained with them over the years. Though 17 says they are not the originals, the chapter ends with the implications that they might be. Episode 186. In this episode, Gohan uses one of his most long-lasting attacks, the Soaring Dragon Strike, which has appeared in many video games since then as one of Gohan's signature moves, with even adult Gohan using it. In Sparking Zero, it's part of Gohan's grab, but only against Cell, where he gets a unique animation. Episode 187. Gohan uses the Kamehameha for the first time in this episode, slowly adopting it into his moveset from here on out. Android 18 is also released. In Dragon Ball Super, it's revealed that the androids were indeed conscious inside Cell the entire time, and could hear and see everything. Episode 188. We get quite a few major character deaths in this episode. First, Goku and King Kai sacrificing himself to save Earth from Cell's self-destruction, with 17 dying within him as well. Then, when Cell comes back, he shoots a random death beam that kills Trunks. Goku in particular was supposed to stay dead, with Akira Toriyama going as far as apologizing to Goku and feeling sad about the scene, but Toriyama would bring Goku back eventually, realizing that Gohan didn't fit the leading role quite as well. Episode 189. Future Gohan and present Gohan have interesting parallels in this episode. While future Gohan lost his arm defending Trunks from the androids, present Gohan gets his arm broken and rendered useless while saving Vegeta from Cell. Episode 190. This episode has an anime original flashback where we see Cell's future and his origin, specifically the death of Dr. Gero in his timeline. He's still killed by 17 and 18, but in this, they're in the basement of the lab, and 17 kills him with a hand swipe instead of a kick. 17 and 18 then blow up the lab, but Cell is intact and he develops. Also, while editing this, I realized that 17 killing Gero is one of the most reanimated scenes in Dragon Ball. We see future Gero in this episode, the original death, his death in Super 13, a flashback in GT, and even Superhero. Someone behind the scenes really doesn't like Gero. Episode 191. The Z Fighters all helping out with their blast against Cell is filler. This doesn't happen in the manga. Forms are also switched around in the anime, as Goku and Vegeta were both in base form during the climax, but are shown as Super Saiyan in the anime. The father-son Kamehameha is one of the most iconic techniques in all of Dragon Ball, with it being remixed many times over through the franchise, including some with Bardock and future Gohan in Heroes and Xenoverse. And it's even inspired works outside, such as this illustration of Iron Man and Spider-Man by Yusuke Murata. Episode 192. In this episode, the Z Fighters gather at Kami's lookout to use the Dragon Balls. When they wish to revive those killed by Cell, they completely forget to revive those killed by 19 and 20 on the island. So, damn, rip I guess. For some reason, the Kai version of this episode also mentions that King Kai was revived with the wish, which isn't the case in neither the original version of the anime, nor the manga, not even what comes next in Kai the Final Chapters. Episode 193. In this episode, Android 18 leaves the lookout after Krillin wishes for her and her brother's bomb to be taken out. We don't see where she goes, but the Dragon Ball Super manga does show us that. She goes to see Android 17, who was revived at the site of the Cell games. She tells him about everything, and how now that Goku is dead, they can live free lives. Surely, this not only played into 18's decision to get with Krillin, but it also convinced Android 17 to join the Tournament of Power in the manga. Episode 194. This is the epilogue episode of the Cell arc, and the final time future Trunks would appear in the series until Dragon Ball Super outside of the movies.
This man isn't black! What?
The old man that Trunks saves in this episode from being shot by 17 is actually killed in the manga, though he's shot off screen and we only see the bullet casing fly by. Funny enough, despite Trunks being gone after this, he remained one of the most popular characters until the very end of the story, being voted as number 3 in the Buu Arc manga popularity poll. Episode 195. In this episode, we travel to Otherworld and meet a plethora of new characters, some of which are from Goku's past. This is the first and only time Goku meets King Cold in the present timeline, since Trunks stole his kill. We also get some cool Easter eggs, including a pair of Shimoyans and someone from the same race as Moa from Movie 8, as well as a Kanasan warrior from the Bardock special, and another warrior with a vest, which some headcanon as Metamorian, but this was definitely not on purpose. One of the most interesting things about this episode are the color changes Toei added last minute. In the next episode preview for this episode, we see Goku turn Super Saiyan, but when the episode aired, Goku's legendary golden hair has been changed back to black, instead of the usual gold. This was likely done to save Piccolo the surprise of Super Saiyan for later, but since it was already animated, they ended up giving Goku a new form by accident, which has been retroactively given the name of Super Saiyan Power in games like Heroes. Episode 196. In this episode, the Otherworld Tournament begins, and we get acquainted with more heroes of the Northern Quadrant, one of them being Olibu. Though he was a completely filler creation, he makes an appearance in the official Dragon Ball Super manga, in a bonus chapter for the Superhero arc. Trunks' class takes a trip to a museum dedicated to Earth's greatest heroes, such as Master Mutaito, who defeated King Piccolo, the Great Saiyaman, Mr. Satan, and an unknown hero, who's actually Goku, are also there. But one big surprise was seeing Olibu, one of the only times something from anime filler was brought into the manga. Episode 197. Speaking of Toyotaro drawing filler characters, the Otherworld fighters who appear in this episode have all received their own little tributes as one of Toyotaro's monthly drawings. Additionally, the South and Northern Kais are the only cardinal Kais we meet in the original manga, but Toyotaro brought the West and East Kai, who were only in anime filler before, into the manga as cameos in the table of contents for Dragon Ball Super Volume 22. Episode 198. Piccolo and Goku finally enter the ring in this episode, but Piccolo's design was almost completely different. Toei first designed Piccolo to have a character design of the previously mentioned Vest character, and even this more normal-looking guy, but Toriyama came in and designed his own version of the character. Episode 199. The climax of Goku and Piccolo's battle. Something interesting about this is who is in the crowd. There's some reused character designs and Easter eggs, like an unknown Namekian, someone who looks like an older Cell Saga Gohan with Piccolo's outfit, a guy who looks like General Akbar from Star Wars, Akira Toriyama himself as Toribot, someone who stole Broly's fit, and even a little Easter egg of Akman, a little demon guy from one of Toriyama's other manga. Even the hero from Dragon Quest II, and someone that looks exactly like the Great Saiyaman before he even shows up in the series. But there's a lot more of these. And that was one fact for every Dragon Ball Z episode, from the Cell arc to the Otherworld Tournament. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to father-son Kamehameha that subscribe button. And if you want to learn about the manga about Goku's strongest student from after the end of Z by Akira Toriyama, then be sure to check out my video on Neko Majin.